Welcome and good morning, everyone, to Coffee and Darts, episode 90. And of course, for episode 90, I had to bring back Jennifer Mounts and Dax to talk about some incredible darting stuff like the grip. So stay tuned as we get into talk about the grip today. But before we do that, just want to make sure that you're all excited about darts. You're excited about this show, of course, episode 90. So give me a ton 80 in the comments. Get your questions ready in regards to the grip. Dax is here to talk all about the grip. Good morning, Anthony. This can be an exciting show. Jenn is here too to talk about the grip. She has been modeling darts for quite a while, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Grip it and rip it is what Anthony says. So excited about this, but I want to thank our sponsors, of course, Magicwear and the beautiful jerseys like I'm wearing here. These will be posted on the new website, which launches later today's Friday, so early next week. So yeah, it's a Friday show versus a Tuesday show. But so that'll be early next week. You'll see a new website that's going to just be a little bit more streamlined, not so much stuff on it. So it's going to be kind of just cleaner, funner, and you'll be able to get cool jerseys like this that are designed by our own Jenn Mounts. Well, I say own, whatever, by Jenn herself. And I do want to thank Shot Darts. Of course, Shot bringing the artwork for us to throw, and then Condor flights and shafts, with the axe system there. All right, guys, let's bring on our guest today, and they'll tell you a little bit about themselves if you don't know who they are, and we're going to get into the grip. So to start off with, we've got to add Jenn. Good morning, Jenn.
Good morning, everyone.
And then we have Dax. Good morning, Dax.
Good morning. Great to be back.
Yeah, so we got East Coast and West Coast here. Should be fun. Talking grip. The grip. The biggest question in darts is the grip. How do you hold a dart? How do the pros hold a dart? And why are darts different shapes? These all revolve around that grip question. And of course, Dax, you came out with an incredible article on that, and Jenn, you modeled very, very well for that. So if you guys haven't seen, let me post this up in the comments here. This is the article that we are referring to. You'll find it there in the link right now, and in any of those pictures, that is Jenn's beautiful hands there. Jenn, what's up with the get up though today? Got dressed up for us? It's episode 90.
I know. I love being on an even number for sure. So
yes.
Appreciate the episode 90. But this is a coincidence. I wouldn't have time to get dressed for work after the interview, so I had to get ready to go beforehand. But this is going to be the last official day of my Business Monster series. This is day 30, and I am dressing as the Great Gatsby. So I'll be saying farewell to daily postings, which is a photo series that no one really understands, but that's kind of the point of it. It's completely haphazard and random, and it's just all revolved around the concept of being obsessed with business, which is derived from, I don't think anyone realized it, but it's from Bob's Burgers, the animated TV series. The daughter, Tina, is a teen entrepreneur in one episode, and she gets called a business monster. So that has stuck with me ever since. And now I wear business formal to work. This is obviously a tuxedo from my wedding that I'm looking for reasons to continue to wear to make the money worthwhile. So a little over the top today, but hopefully not too distracting for our grip talk.
Yes. And if anybody's ever been to A to Z, they all dress like this. Don't let her, everybody is in full on 3-piece suits. It's the bomb, the shoes. You guys think I'm obsessed with shoes? You should see those at A to Z. It's like shoe heaven there. So check that out. Hey, Dax, what's going on, sir? How are you?
Good morning, Matt. Doing great. Happy to be joining you again with Jenn, and happy that darts is starting to pick up across the country in different ways. It's been exciting.
Yes, human beings are back, and there are roosters. Just so everybody knows, it is 7 a.m. for Jenn and I. And sometimes there are roosters going off, and it's not mine. That's all I'm saying.
Apologies, you guys.
See, I have little kids. They would literally terrorize a rooster. You have a dog and roosters. So there you go. It works. All right, guys. So before we get into, and Anthony made a comment, it's Jenn's rooster. Before we get into talking about the grip, because that's the big thing. Those of you guys that are out there that are on the stream right now, please throw your questions out there. let's talk about the grip, forward grip, middle grip, rear grip. What does that all mean? Where do I put my thumb? Where do I put my finger? Do I put it on the point? Do I not put it on the point? Do I do that with soft tip? Do I do that with steel tip? Why is there grip on a point? All of these questions are potentially going to be answered today. But before we do that, let's get to know our guests a little bit more. So we'll go ladies first. Jen, if you would tell us just a little bit about yourself, that would be wonderful.
Sure, no problem. I am the on-site graphic designer for Magic Darts Incorporated. So that is the parent company that owns A2ZDarts.com, Magicwear, and now USA Darts Production with the live streaming. So essentially, I'm responsible for creating content marketing, and I run the daily operations of the shirt and live streaming company. And of course, we work with Dax, the wonderful Dax, who provides articles for us through our A to Z blog currently. And today's topic I'm really excited about. I really think it's going to be one of the most influential pieces of literature that he's put out thus far, because grip can greatly influence your trajectory of your success from a very early stage of getting into the game.
Well, thank you, Jen. And Dax, that was a great intro from Jen into Dax. Dax, if you could, enlighten us with some East Coast verbiage, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I've been a player for 17, 18 years, both East Coast and West Coast. I've lived in New York. I've lived in LA. I've lived in Providence and played everywhere that I've settled. Been a dart coach, instructor for the better part of 8 or 9 years. And as of the past year, I've been doing this column for A to Z with Jen. And it's really been cathartic for me, and I'm glad it's been helpful for the community. I've always been the guy who, when out, is always happy to help and answer questions and try to really distill information to make it really digestible for any player on any level. This game is accessible, but to do it well, we have to really get specific with nuance sometimes. And when we can break that stuff down, it's really something I take a pleasure and a pride in doing for other players.
Yeah, and I've enjoyed your articles, and of course, you and I have been able to talk about darts, and just your plethora of knowledge is incredible. And the way you look at darts, being able to step back and give a big picture of a darts player's throw and understand what's going on is just incredible. Not everybody can do that. So very happy to have both of you here talking about the grip. One thing before we dive into it that I do want to throw out there, and you guys have probably thought about this, but we need to take all of these and make a book. Guys, we need a book with this, and we need to get it out there, because that, I think, will, solidify a lot of this information together. I know the blog is awesome, and you guys can find that at A-Z-Darts.com and just look at the blog. You'll see it there, and of course there's a link available. But I think a book would be really awesome. It could be like, Dax, you there and all that stuff. You could sell the book with your darts. Like, I could package this. Let's do it. So anyway, it'd be the first book dart combo. I'm just saying. But in any case, let's get into some questions. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about the grip. Dax, I'm going to let you guys kind of discuss a little bit the grip, and then I'll throw some questions out. But let's talk about, the grip in general.
Sure. The one thing that I think we all as players, soft tip or steel, have really tried to observe and manage and figure out is grip. We all, I think, have this belief that there's something wrong with the grip, or how do we often ask the question, how do you grip the dart when we're out seeing other players? And what we like to do is obviously mimic people who are successful, which totally makes sense. But the one most unique part of our body that dart players manage is their hand. And I really started to process, well, are we thinking about grip the right way? Are we talking about grip the right way? And too often I found there was no common nomenclature, no common naming conventions or way to really describe it amongst each other, amongst players at different levels, amongst players of the same level, to say, what are you doing and what works, without really thinking about our hand, our specific, unique hand. We have lots of bones, lots of tendons, different size, different strength, and we all do different things with our hands professionally, which leads to, all different types of strength and flexibility. And as a result, I said, we really need to, as a community, break this down a little better so that when we're talking about it, we have a better understanding, and then we can address it physically a little better.
So looking at the grip and talking about this, and Jen, I'd love to have you kind of inject a little, because you, as a darts player and someone who has played, a lot of darts and came into the sport, I guess, at an older age. I don't know if that really makes sense when it comes to darts,
sure.
But you didn't start off as a young kid. You came to darts, and I believe it was you and your brother. I think it was your brother that kind of got you into darts, and then
my cousin and I.
Your cousin, okay, sorry. You guys got into playing darts, and I just remember hearing the story, like you guys were worried about disturbing the neighbors and all that. So I mean, darts has been a part of your life for a while. What were the grip struggles for you getting into darts?
Oh, sure. This is definitely would be a good summary for those of you that have not read the grip article. My biggest struggle was figuring out, how does grip work with barrel choice? And the number one thing that I think Dax wanted everyone to come away with after reading the article is you should inform your grip around the barrels that you like to throw, or what you might think looks cool or might even just feel okay. Your grip itself and what feels comfortable and what's going to be consistent should guide your barrel choice. And so I did not have that understanding. I don't think a lot of people talk about grip in a more advanced way. They do dumb it down a little too much, which is not always a bad thing, because you don't want to overwhelm someone when they're first coming into the game and trying to expand on their skill, and you want to do it slowly and make one change at a time. And I think with American culture, it can be really tough. People are not only very stubborn, but they tend to want to overwhelm themselves with changing too many things. And the second biggest thing, if not maybe the most important thing that Dax might have wanted for people to recognize after reading the article, is that the very last thing you might want to change is your grip, because it is the most, like he said, the unique thing to you as an individual, and it is by far the most difficult thing to change. One thing I noticed, to answer your question, that I struggled with is when I tried to change my grip, it would be successful maybe for one day or so, and then over time, as I came back to the concept of throwing darts, with your subconscious mind, not thinking about it in order to stay consistent, have muscle memory, just playing darts, calmly. My body started to just revert back to the old grip on its own. So I struggled with that a lot, and not really putting in a conscious effort to make a forced change. And that made me realize that, it's a difficult journey. Exactly how are you going to change your grip? And you have to do it in a certain way that your body is going to naturally keep on with that change. And it also made me realize that you absolutely want to start talking about form and mechanics and find a dart coach like Dax potentially when you first get into the sport, because you're going to develop very strong habits that are going to be super difficult to break. I came in at 21 years of age trying to play the game. Didn't worry about form and mechanics at all. Luckily, I was close to kind of what I would have eventually evolved to throw like. But I picked on a coach about maybe a year or so into the game, and then was very fortunate to have that eye on me at all times, and then could come back and see my progress after a month or so and readjust from there. But grip is difficult. When I started to develop my dart hitch a little bit, it was absolutely, I think grip was one of the biggest contributing factors in terms of a physical culprit. And the reason why I struggled so much is because my forefinger and thumb did not touch. That's one of the biggest realizations that I had. They were separate, and I had three different pressure points, so top, bottom, and towards the front, which meant I had no control left and right. And so my dart would pull either which way and miss to the left and right a lot, which you definitely want to miss up and down in darts if you can miss a certain direction. The moment I took my thumb and forefinger and interlocked them, it helped me with two things. I could not roll the dart in and out of my hand, so there was no coil, as Dax has explained that in the article. And I didn't need really any other fingers to prevent the dart from moving left and right, because it kind of formed this bit of a triangle kind of feel, and it was very just solid and straight. So my take back, follow through, was easy without having to really pinch down on my barrel. And the release was much easier after that point. So those are the biggest epiphanies I think I would say I've had with my grip.
Excuse me. I was reading comments there. We do have some questions coming in. So, Dax, you mentioned in the article there's no one proper way to grip a dart. So you're saying that pretty much everybody could have their potential own grip, but there's going to be slight nuances within that. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And then I want to hit on the whole Phil Taylor aspect. These are all the starting parts of your article, and then we'll dive more into it.
Sure. There truly is no one proper way. There are some who try to approach it as though it should be a uniform way. But again, if our hands were all identical and did the same things for work, I think that would be an easier argument to make. What I tried to do in the article was break down 4 common grips, but common in the way we use our hand, meaning how many fingers are on the barrel and where, so that we can start to really bucket these grip styles with a name. And the names are ones that literally I just said, who epitomizes this grip? What pro that we've all seen or can reference epitomizes the grip? So I broke it down into 4 grips, 4 pro grips with a few variances. And again, it's all based on how many fingers are touching the dart and where. All the little nuances of where the pressure is and how far back and how far front, that right now is not part of the discussion. I want to break it down for everyone to say, how many fingers do you use and where do you put them on the barrel? From there, based on how each individual does that, and I've always said, and I reference in the article, how you first picked up a dart, whether it be your average brass bar dart or a steel tip barrel, something inside you was comfortable with how you picked it up. From that point being, what our brains didn't process was, oh wow, there's a whole bunch of different barrel styles and barrel weights and thickness of diameter. We just stayed with what was physically comfortable in our hand, and in grabbing different barrels, we didn't know whether it was, is it the archer or the arrow? I mean, what is feeling good and what is feeling bad? And most of the time we want to blame ourselves and say, what am I doing wrong? Which is why we always ask the question. So what I did was break it down into basically what would be the 2-finger grip, the first one I talk about. And excuse that, again, this is part of the problem that we all deal with in searching grip. And Jenn and the A to Z team took fabulous photos to really illustrate exactly how I described all these. They were done immaculately. So I really encourage people to read this article, because those pictures that you normally Google, these are the pictures you want to see. Again, and this illustrates it perfectly. Peter Manley, big hand. He had that short, kind of bulbous dart, and he really only had 2 fingers on that barrel. So often we get when we're watching professional darts and we see them draw and their action forward, we can't pause it fast enough, and the shot isn't in close enough to really see what each player is doing that well. So the first one I named the Manley grip for Peter Manley, thumb and index. Past that, when we get 3 fingers on the barrel, or our thumb and our middle and index, it's Lowe, John Lowe. John Lowe was probably one of the best of all time, obviously, but he was a guy who actually allowed us to view the grip a little bit. He, on his draw, there's a slight coil, which made it a little difficult sometimes to see what was going on. He had a slight coil, but those 2 fingers stayed roughly on top of the barrel, point of the dart elevated, and because his dart was that thicker barrel, we were able to see finger placement a little better. So it was really great too, and I'm glad I was able to find that image because it really it illustrates it perfectly. The Lowe, then, because you have now a a third finger on the barrel, the variance ends up being, what do you do with that third finger, the middle finger being? So the variance I talk about in this article really just has to do with what one of the fingers, generally the last finger, is doing. And the variance would be the middle finger being underneath the barrel. So as you scroll down there and see the low variance, Rob Cross is a great example of that. His is a tough grip to observe. He pulls back, has that little hitch, and it's very, he has a coil and rips it really quickly. So it's hard to watch. It looks like it's in his fist. But on close observation, he's got the middle finger underneath, and putting the middle finger underneath does something that allows you to stabilize the point from a little bit of the north-south. So ideally on your draw, the point should be slightly elevated by the time you're coming forward and releasing. And having a finger underneath the barrel or underneath the point allows that to happen a lot easier. From there, it goes to Beaton grip or a four-finger grip. Steve Beaton, a player to watch for a lot of reasons, most of which is his longevity. He's been doing this longer than most and making world championships longer than some of these players have been alive. So he's got the three fingers on top of the barrel, index, middle, and ring finger. And he pulls back very quickly and always hard to observe. But even if you've noticed everything he's done over the years and the slight weight and hair and mustache variations, his grip has remained remarkably consistent. And I attribute his successes really to keeping everything concise with his grip. The two variances with the Beaton grip are obviously then one putting the ring finger underneath the barrel. As you scroll down a little bit, you can see Sulovic is a perfect pro to observe with this. Despite a little bit of his eccentricities and his twisting of the barrel on the line, he keeps that ring finger below the nose and point to help keep the point elevated upon release. This is him holding the dart basically right before his full drawback. He starts with that extended arm and twists, and then has that a little bit of that unique drawback and push. And then a grip that Beaton variance number 2, again, three fingers three fingers getting involved, the index, middle, and ring. Although you've seen this now with Hedda, and he actually gets the middle finger underneath the barrel, but then puts the ring finger back on top of the barrel. This really adds to a level of stability. He really has shown a great amount of consistency with this. I find it to be a unique grip, and it's not seen all that often. But you also see Anastasia has experimented with this grip. She has had and a great deal of success in the women's game. It's really something that I wouldn't be surprised if caught on more now that Hedda is on the stage a lot and being seen. And then going to the very bottom, Bristow. Bristow had one of the more unique, involved grips, coils, and releases there was. I use Bristow as the perfect example of why grip is not universal. If grip was something that should have been one way and the only way, he would have taught it to Taylor. And I write this specifically in the article because obviously their mentor-mentee relationship is widely known. Taylor's grip is nothing like Bristow's grip. And again, hand differences, what they did professionally, all the variables that go into differences in hand will end up being differences in grip. And Bristow's very involved. Some people put the whole hand on the dart. If it works, that's all it has to do. It has to be comfortable and it has to work.
I want to throw this out real quick because you have this comment here. You know, how Phil Taylor led us astray in thinking and talking about the grip. And Jenn, I want to throw the question out to you first, and then Dax will dive in to your comments here. But Jenn, real quick, because a question that's coming in, or that I hear a lot in regards to the barrel that I helped design and why I designed it the way I did, and so forth, is the barrel grip combination. Do you find, Jenn, that depending on the barrel, your grip should be different, or you should design your grip to the barrel, or do you find a barrel that fits the grip that you have? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, you dart players out there that are considering sponsorship, your barrel company is going to be by far the absolute most difficult choice and the most difficult sponsorship to obtain. Reason being, it has the greatest impact on your performance, your barrel by far. And I'm talking from a very beginner stage to very advanced level of throw. That's what's going to affect your performance, the trajectory of the flight to the board more than anything. When you talk about starting to experiment with shaft, flight, point, and those variances, you need to be able to create consistent form and mechanics first before that ever makes a true difference. And worrying about deflection and how to correct certain things, we're talking the most, way, way beyond in terms of skill level and what you need to focus on in the beginning. So barrel and grip is so important. And your grip, you're going to experiment. So it's going to be a journey for a little while. You would never want to design a barrel until you've been essentially performing consistently. You're not even thinking about grip. And that's just consistently, what is going to be the thing for you for a while. So as Dax says, it's going to be a journey of experimentation and figuring out how you like to grip a barrel, where, and then what cuts essentially couple with the shape and the barrel to help you perform and release the dart easier. So if you don't even worry about performance for a second and outcome, just to be able to grip the barrel, bring it up into your set position, take back and release the same exact way every time. You don't feel any tweaks and changes and little hitches or hiccups along the way. That's definitely the goal in the beginning for me anyway. If I were to sit and create some kind of a plan for someone to develop their throw over time. So I would definitely not say choosing different barrels and then trying to change your grip to fit that. That would be the last thing that I would ever hope to do as a player myself. And the grip and figuring out what kind of a barrel kind of fits, like exactly how many fingers, like Dax is saying, he's simplifying it in the best way to begin with, how many are going to be touching the barrel, and then deciding that helps you guide a lot of choices. Suddenly you can really figure out, okay, now how long do I want my barrel to be, what kind of diameter? Because if you're only using 2 fingers to grip the barrel, you don't necessarily would want a super long dart. There's a lot of surface area that you're wasting, and you're kind of losing the feeling of the weight of the dart in your hand. You want that center of gravity to be right where your grip is, because then that keeps everything consistent from your take back and follow through. If you pull the dart back and suddenly all the weight is in the front, but you're gripping in the rear, that release impact and that trajectory is going to be all wonky. So a lot of people need to think about, weight distribution of their barrel, how long is it, and feeling the weight of the dart in their hand the whole way. And then your cuts, the machining of the dart. I think there was a great question earlier. Someone was talking about, I want to say they live in a very cold environment, and they're talking about the texture of their hand. And that's something that absolutely doesn't get talked about enough. And
can I throw that question out there real quick?
Sure. Yeah.
It says, and this came from Gary Brooks, in a colder area, I find that I get what's called stone hands. It affects my grip and the most ideas on how to deal with that when it happens.
I guess that's more about temperature in that sense, but it's very, very, very common for dart players to carry around hand warmers, especially in tournament halls. This is like kind of a culture shock. You've been practicing in a certain condition and environment all your life, and then you start to travel to play, and you're dealing with different altitudes and different environments, and casinos, venues, they tend to stay very cold. I always bring lots of jackets, especially if I'm running a booth or something. I get very cold. Some players run hot, they don't worry about it. But I've seen players absolutely become devastated and can't perform because their hands are too cold. So just changing the temperature alone, carrying hand warmers in your pockets could be a thing. But when you talk about the texture of your hand itself, or not just temperature too, if you have, I guess when I saw stone hand, I started thinking maybe I thought a person meant they have really rough hands. So that's what got me to start thinking about how would you rate the roughness and texture of your own hands? For example, that can guide barrel choice. If anything, that's the first thing we start to ask someone when they walk into our store. We look at their hands and start there if they're a complete novice. And so for me, evidently, I've lived not a tough life, and I have a very smooth and dry hand. So a smooth hand is best accompanied by a smooth dart. Barrels that have too much grip might get caught on my hand, for example, and it will become difficult for me to release the dart. Or I've even experimented with, really rough textures and deep cuts, and they have just made my hands feel sore and raw over time. So that's something to consider. And you got to think, do your hands might be smooth, but do they get clammy? And so that's something to worry about too. A dart that has little to no grip might easily slip during your release if you have clammy hands. So something to consider, we stick with a really simple philosophy. If you have smooth hands, look for a smooth dart. If you have super rough, calloused hands, you need something with texture. Otherwise, it'll get caught in your hands for sure. Your construction worker, something on those lines, which we do see that trait a lot in darts.
Yeah, no, I know that I talk about designing a barrel, but I have reviewed and touched hundreds and hundreds of barrels and really spent the time finding one that worked for me. And it was based on the texture of my fingers and what felt good. Did I want something that was more grippy or something that bit in to my fingers versus something that didn't? Right. And that's kind of where my design elements came into fact. And I took into some of the considerations, the design of the barrel, as well as kind of this grip idea from Phil Taylor. And Dax, if you wouldn't mind diving in, because you make this comment, and literally it says how Phil Taylor led us astray in thinking and talking about grip. What did you kind of mean by that, and where do we, get that wrong?
It's an attention-getting subtitle, isn't it?
It is.
So, and it was made to get our attention, but it was also meant to really put forward a very unique point that we all deal with every day whenever we do any type of writing. So somewhere along the way, years ago, in an interview, Taylor very nonchalantly and very plainly, when someone asked him about his grip, said, I grip it like a pencil. I grip it like I grip a pencil. And with the best player on the planet saying something like that, everybody listened. And, it's almost in the exact same vein of, for anyone who wants to read the good book, everyone reads it and kind of soaks up their own interpretation of what was meant. Well, personally, I don't think Phil Taylor meant anything more than what he said, but it put us all as players and the whole community on tilt to say, well, I'll grip it like I grip a pencil. Now, meanwhile, when we're all gripping a pencil or a pen, we all have very different ways we grip a pen or a pencil. As a result, we all have different pens or pencils we like to use, different shapes, different thicknesses, all of those things. And it's completely related to the topic of barrel choice and grip style with your barrel. If we all did it the same way, there'd be one barrel. And if we all had the same hand, there'd be one barrel and one weight. And we wouldn't have to worry about that as a variable. But that's not the case. We all do things differently. There'd only be one pencil. So I think when we all looked at that and kind of interpreted it as we wanted to, 9 out of 10 players, I think, say, I have the pencil grip. Well, I don't know that they do, or necessarily that they grip their dart the way they do grip a pencil. So it's one of those things to say, it's like it was one of the only pieces of nomenclature we've ever been given on grip. And we all just kind of went with it without really kind of taking that step back. I wanted to kind of put it all on its head. We often also talk about the concept of front gripper or rear gripper. while there's some validity to that discussion, I don't think that's where we should start. Again, we all have different hands. We all have different styles of grip styles of how we like to grip it. So we can't necessarily say I grip it in the front or I grip it in the back. I personally have, as defined by the article, the low variance one. I have my index finger above and my middle finger below, and I could comfortably say I grip the whole barrel. My thumb and index finger pinch in the back, and then my middle finger is underneath the nose. So by the time, I'm gripping the whole dart. I can't say I grip in the front or the back. I'm more focused on, and I think more players should be focused on the style in which, meaning how their hand touches the dart, as opposed to some of the older discussions we've had. I really think it's time that we are a little more progressive in talking about it. I think it's only going to benefit the community.
So push point. I want to talk a little bit about the push point, and you guys can both, get in on this, because that seems to be a common comment that's thrown out there. Manufacturers talk about the push point and, multiple push points within a barrel. What, first off, is the push point? And should you look for a barrel that has specific push points? Like I'm holding a barrel right here that's got some, it's a little bit of smooth here. It's got some rings, and then it's really grippy in the back. But like, where would the push point be on this particular dart? I know where for me it would be, but if you guys could talk a little bit about that particular element within the barrel and the grip, and what should you be looking for in a push point? So Jen, I'll throw it to you first, and then Dax, we'll just kind of go in that round robin there.
Yeah, I was struggling with that one, because I actually think that's a very advanced way of thinking about your grip and how you're going to release the dart. And like, as Dax is kind of pointing out, he even made me realize in prior videos, because it's common practice to only refer to darts players as rear, middle, and front grippers, we've really limited ourselves in terms of the knowledge and how it can resonate with the audience. And I've caught myself doing that. I'm thinking back, I've really only taken, a review of something and then tried to tailor it to a certain crowd of people, but I'm leaving out a huge group that might not resonate with the content. So I think in a way, the push point conversation might also do that, and saying, you're going to want to release like right here, and this certain kind of cut is going to be the reason for that. But it all has so many elements that come into play, like Dax is saying, that could be different for a certain person. So I'm hopefully Dax has a little more insight there. I'm not quite sure if that is something that people should look for, or if it's only for more advanced players that have a very good understanding. Like Matt is saying, he has tried literally hundreds of different barrels, felt them himself, even knows what the difference in textures can feel like coatings, like sandblasting. We're getting really past beyond just the machining and basic shape and make of the metals. So yeah, if Dax, you have anything to add there?
Another, unique nuance, and I think in part it's a great marketing word for a lot of the companies. But I think there's some validity in thinking about it. And I think it's easier to recognize or maybe define as kind of like that place where your thumb and whatever part of your index finger are locked in behind the weight of the dart, or where the propulsion is coming from. And on any straight barrel, there's really no way for your mind to grasp the density of the metal and where it might be the heaviest. I mean, theoretically, a balance or a straight barrel should be mostly balanced, although some of them are not. So your head really is not going to wrap itself around where do I need my thumb to be consistently in that regard if I want to be behind the weight, so to speak, or where the push point might be. I think it might be an easier conversation to manage in the head when you're thinking about any type of bulbous torpedo dart or anything that has a small scallop where you can literally repetitively put your thumb in one place to get behind it, so to speak. But, it's, again, I think that's, as Jen was alluding to, a little bit more of a specific nuance to specific types of barrels. When you're talking about completely straight barrels, your camera's there you go. Yeah, so that one looks, and this is just on quick observation, it looks like it might be a little front heavy, and there's a more of a textured grip as you get past the coloring in that barrel. It might be right behind there, but again, depending on your grip style, and how, the thumb ends up obviously being the universal finger in no matter what grip style you use. So towards the end of the article, I try to give just a handful of general pointers that no matter what grip style you have are worth thinking about when you're talking about grip. So the thumb is one thing that you see. The thumb always feels like it needs to be behind the weight or behind the push point. One of the greatest things in relation to that, really, and this is going to be a just as involved follow-up article that I reference at the end, is draw sighting and your release or action. So the draw is the dart coming up. The sighting is literally your vision of the target, and then your release and action to the board is where the push point or the weight of your hand stays behind the barrel. What I reference, a lot of dart players on their draw have some level of coil where the dart either spins or and cocks a little bit as they're getting to their set position. All well and good, and it's all part of everyone's individual throw. The one challenge that I put to anyone who has a bit of a coil is two. One, by the time the dart comes back, you want, for that split second, your hand to have stopped coiling. And two, you want the point slightly elevated upon release. So if you get into a good rhythm and you're pulling back and letting go really fast, Adrian Lewis is great to really watch with this, especially early in a match. He's got a really great repetitive coil, and when he's in rhythm, he's really pretty to watch. But when he's a little off rhythm, you can tell by the fact that his tails come up a little higher. His flights are higher in the board. He ends up coming below his target, and you see him do early on in a match routinely cover 19 to the 18 because the angle of his lie is not what he wants yet. It's not optimal.
Exactly.
And he's got a really good coil where he pulls back. If his dart is too taut in his hand when he's coming back, that point is getting released low, and the dart is not coming out clean. So he's actually not getting the full aerodynamics of his barrel and his flight by the time he's getting his action forward.
A question, I guess, for both of you, because if we go back 3-4 years ago, we saw a lot of darts players laying their darts in where they were standing them up. You speak of Adrian Lewis. I mean, Adrian Lewis would literally, I don't even know how they did, how he did it, but his darts would stand almost erect on the dartboard. How they were in the dartboard, I'm still not sure. It's like his point was bent. We saw, why am I blanking on names now? We've seen a number of professional darts players, which I'm blanking completely, do that with their darts. And it seems to have gone away. And I'm sure this has more to do with flights than necessarily grip. But does grip play into, how you stand your darts up? And this is going to be more steel tip, of course, than soft tip. But, or how you're, pushing the dart or releasing the dart towards the board. Where does the grip kind of play into that? Do you change your grip slightly if you're playing steel tip versus soft tip? I mean, how does that work out? I mean, Jen, you've played both. Did you find that you changed your grip based on whether you're playing soft tip or steel tip?
Me, never. I also didn't change my barrel weight. I used conversion points, and I picked a conversion point that was the same weight, if not as close as possible, to my soft tip point. And they make, carbon fiber conversion points now that are much lighter. Or if the amazing thing about darts and the engineering of darts now is you can, with the metal makeup, you can do anything. You can remove weight, you can add weight, you can, if you are fortunate enough to have both soft tip and steel tip barrels made for you, you can do anything you want. You can match them exactly with the point included, or you can go a little heavier. I would say there are so many elements that can come into play that can affect the exact way your dart impacts the board. If it's standing at an upward angle, completely coming in flat, or falling down a little, their grip can change that, absolutely. But in the beginning, I think it's a little more important. We're kind of talking more at the pro level, I guess you would say, but in the beginning, I would still say it's so much more important to make sure that you can grip the dart. Sorry, you can draw the dart into your grip, take back and release the same way consistently, and to make sure that there's not a ton of resistance. Dax alludes to this a lot in the article about the concept of, like, you shouldn't be squeezing too hard, your dart. It shouldn't be difficult for it to release out of your hand. It should be a nice, smooth, simple process that you don't have to think too hard about in the future, that is second nature to you. And the cool thing is, my best advice to someone is I would figure out exactly how to grip the barrel the way that works for your hand, and then find a barrel that fits into that, to where it's all about the feeling of it. And then you can alter different elements in order to change that flight pattern. Like I was saying before, where you can change shaft, shape, length, weight, flight, and point to be able to get that exact angle that you want, or have the dart fly. Because the smoother the trajectory of the dart, you can change that only really with the way that you're taking back and releasing the dart. And although we like to think that, a barrel just has this nice perfect arc into the board, when you slow motion, I want to say Dax already talks about this in the article, but if you were to take slow motion of a flight pattern in the air, I mean, it's just like crazy, going like this and then hitting the board. So the oscillation, of that flight pattern, do you want it eventually coming up and down into the board? There's a lot of different ways that wavelength can eventually hit. So I would definitely say definitively, I would not ever change my grip switching between the two different games of soft and steel tip, and I wouldn't change my grip in order to change the flight pattern of my dart going to the board.
Dax?
A great way to observe this is twofold for players who are both soft and steel players. Obviously, if you're primarily a soft tip player but dabble in steel, soft tips, no matter how you're throwing, if they stick level. So you don't have a sense of, like you were saying, it doesn't not necessarily apply directly to soft tip. But if that same player does exactly the same thing on a steel tip, they should analyze, well, does it still go in level? More times than not, the answer is no, which is fine. The unique challenge being, and perhaps if you're going to put a little bit of scientific thought behind it, in terms of grip, what you'll see is, if you go up to the line at home today on a steel tip board and just do the quick experiment of trying all these different grip styles, however they feel comfortable in your hand, and observing how your flights land in the board, I promise you'll see some variance. It's not going to be strictly consistent. The one thing I will say is, both back in reference to Adrian Lewis, and then thinking about a player like Taylor, how they land in the board, and this is hypothesis based on a lot of observation, how they land on the board can certainly change based on the coil of your dart, how you draw back and coil it in your hand. Is that coil fully complete by the time you're moving forward? And is that point up on trajectory upon release? Lewis is a perfect example of that. You see his dart level off when he's in his better rhythm and his coil is completed. Phil Taylor, who's a player who has no coil and is really steady in his set position, comes in level to low for having zero coil. That's not to say that is consistent across the board, because again, we're talking about grip style being different. We're talking about height and perspective to the board being different, totally different barrels and flights. So there's a handful of variables that add into that. The one thing that is part of this discussion, which perhaps is for another show and certainly for another article, is the innovation and advances in the board technology, both in the fibers and in the spider, the wires, having changed over the years. So a lot of different things to discuss there that have affected dart lie.
Yeah, definitely. That would be an interesting conversation. Is the difference in the wires, the difference in the boards over the years, and even today, the differences in the different types of boards that are there that players use. And of course, there's the big debate over which board is the best board, and we all have our opinions about that. So that would be a great conversation to have. In regards to grip, we see the scallop coming into a lot of barrels. I put one in mine because that was a placement for where I liked my thumb. And I use that as essentially a push pointer. So, it's a placement. It's a reminder when I grab my dart, it's the same consistently now because of the placement of certain things within the barrel. But for those that are still kind of figuring out their grip, what are things that they should look for in a barrel? Again, there's so many variances, but we're talking in a generalistic state, for say a front, middle, rear gripper, or someone that's gripping a lot of the barrel. What are things that we should look for? And then the biggest question that people are coming out with is spinning the dart. Should you not? Do you throw a dart so that it doesn't spin? How does the grip affect that? I know I'm throwing a lot out there, but if you guys could kind of maybe touch base on some of those things.
Yeah, sure. That's an excellent question. I think it's very difficult to you as an individual to force a spin, a rotation into your dart as it's releasing. I think that I want to say that's your thumb that's affecting that more than anything in your release impact. But sorry, I'll go in order of answering the questions.
Yeah, sorry, I threw like 5 at you. Sorry about that.
Was the first one, what do you look for when looking for a barrel for kind of beginners, people trying to figure out their grip?
Yeah, and is the scallop that we're seeing more and more barrels come up with, we're seeing that happen from manufacturers a lot more. Yeah. Is that something we should be looking for, or is the straight barrel? There are some variances, but there's like 3 different styles of barrels that just get changed. Basically. Sure.
Yeah, there's absolutely, what would you call it? There's a popularity amongst scallops. There's always a popularity in reverse cut. Axial cuts right now that create some kind of a texture and reference point for people. That has been super common for the whole 7 years I've been playing darts, and the scallop is sort of newer. I personally shoot with a scallop dart. And that does 3 things for me. Number 1, it has created a new feel that I've never felt before in other darts. There's an indention into the place where you actually want your thumb and forefinger to be, or maybe just one. Sometimes people put their thumb towards like the middle, or they only use their thumb in the back of the scallop. Again, variances of how you want to actually place your hand onto the dart. So number 1, it creates a new kind of feel all of a sudden that, you probably might not be used to. And then as Matt said, it creates a forced placement of whatever you want to do every single time. It's easy to feel for. You don't have to look for it on the barrel. You can just grab, from your hand as you're drawing your dart each time. And the third thing is you're literally cutting out weight of the metal makeup. So as Dax alluded to earlier, you are naturally behind the weight of the barrel because there's less material there. And so if you have more your middle finger or third ring finger stabilizing the rest of the dart somewhere else, that probably creates a very nice solid feel of the dart coming back and releasing. I personally like the scallop, and I think I've never really thought about it specifically for newer players. However, I think it's more people that have been playing the game a little while, or rear grippers in particular, that happen to just have their forefinger thumb in the back, have been trying it out and recognizing like, oh yeah, this is a very nice, easy placement to make already my mechanics that I've been working on for so long become that much more consistent and easy. So I don't necessarily think that I would suggest it for a brand new player. Certainly experiment with it, experiment with everything that you can, so long as you're not making harsh, strict changes every single time you're experimenting with something new. By experimentation, I more mean, just get into your brain what that feeling is, if it seemed to click, with your setup, and start to make, changes slowly over time based on a lot of research. And so then going back to, what should a newer player look for in a dart? Unfortunately, the thing that we often don't talk about when we have a serious conversation like this is Number one, at the end of the day, no matter what you think is best for you, no matter what you want, your personal budget is going to dictate what barrel you're going to buy. That's the number one thing we start right away. When a client walks through the door, when a dart player walks into our store, our storefront, number one thing, what is your personal budget? We start there. A higher price tag doesn't always mean a higher quality dart. Choosing a set of darts is within your personal budget, and unfortunately, the components that come into play that price a dart in our industry does not always mean higher performance. So I think I would say there's 4 elements that come into play. Number one is the material metal makeup, percentage of tungsten, or what kind of metal. We have brass and nickel from before. Number 2 would be the machining, the actual grips and cuts that are in the barrel, and that can absolutely drastically change price of how complicated that machining is, how long it takes to make the dart. Number 3 would be the shape and overall weight distribution of the barrel, and something fancy might have happened there to create a certain kind of effect. And then the 4th element is the one that can really change price and that doesn't have any intrinsic value sometimes, which is the coating and color that gets added to the darts. So I think I said this before, sometimes coatings can add texture, like sandblasting, so that does have an effect on grip, performance, if it's going to work for you or not, do you like it? But sometimes coatings and colors, it's just purely aesthetic. And that can take a $60 barrel and make it a $120 barrel all of a sudden. So personal budget, it's number one. No one can tell you what's right for you, how often you want to be buying new barrels. I've always highly recommended trying out your friend's barrels. I want to say Dax promotes this in his article. In times of a pandemic and COVID, this is very difficult. But prior to COVID, I have asked maybe 100 different people if I could try their barrel, and 100 different people have asked me if they can try my darts. And lots of people, you always have that one person that has a freaking suitcase of 80 barrels on them at all times, and is that you? It's that person that comes to the bar and is like the best guy to have in a bar ever, and always a great warming personality, and is just there for the love of the game, is a collector, and is helping people discover what is right for them. There's no way you're ever going to be able to afford buying barrels, but there are lots of forums and websites where you can buy, trade, and sell darts. You have to do it, if you're serious about the game. Unless you're fortunate enough to live in Sacramento, California, where you can walk into our Magic Dart store and try the thousands of different barrels that we have. We've got over 900 different barrels on display inside our store that you can physically try. But that's not something that's super common, throughout the entire country, and it's almost non-existent overseas. They're all about direct from manufacturer, online sales, e-commerce only. So yeah, those 4 elements: material, grip, shape, coating, that come into play. You got to look at that when you're a new player. Decide your budget. That's going to limit your options. Decide, are you a right-handed or left-handed player? What is the roughness and texture of your hands? Do you grip all the way into the shaft and then have the remaining balancing finger into the point? You need a longer barrel. Americans naturally have bigger hands than the Asian culture, for example. If you've ever really looked at Asian manufacturers and looked at the best players, they've got the smallest, little, tightest grouping possible on that barrel. They want short, fat barrels. They've got the manly grip more often than not, thumb completely back, projecting the dart forward. A lot of Americans have, I think, more variance in their grip and variance in size of your hand. It's sometimes it's difficult to see barrels being made specifically for Americans and their likings. I've been trying to pay more attention to that lately. So we actually have our own colonial line of barrels. That's the Magic Darts brand, and we've very much experimented with different lengths, and we've tried to make the carrot shape, is what we call it, where it's literally tapered down to a point. Americans seem to have really, kind of creating a new category for them, and bigger guys that have bigger hands for that sort of thing. So unfortunately, it's so hard, you can't isolate perfect little principles for people to follow. It takes, I would say, I really would recommend an experienced player working with you one-on-one to figure all that out for you. It's going to be difficult for you to wrap your head around. And then, of course, if you don't have the time to put the practice in, all this advice is just meaningless. You really got to experiment and give something a fair try. When I would change something about my form of mechanics or a new piece of equipment, I'd give it a minimum a month, and a lot of people don't have the patience for that. So there's a lot of different elements that come into play in personal journey of finding a barrel, and it makes the game fun, but it makes it complicated, and we have a crazy variety to choose from. So take advantage of filtering on websites, figure out, okay, I do like a front heavy bulbous shape front. Maybe I'm a left-handed rhythm shooter. I need something that has a particular shape to where when I'm gripping the dart, I've already formed my grip before I've even pulled it up, because you have only so many microseconds, before you're pulling back and releasing the dart. If you're a rhythm shot, there's lots of things to consider personally. And so I would warn people, it's tough, to just emulate a pro or emulate someone that you like or respect, because they're not your body. They're not your hands. You're your own individual, and you're going to have to figure it out for yourself, unfortunately.
So what you're saying is if I wear a Ricky Evans pink shirt and throw fast, I'm not going to be the same. Damn it. I'm going to return the pink shirt because I've got the body to go with it. So, Dax, as time is winding down, because I want to be respectful of your time, and I know, Jen, you've got a I don't know, something to go to, dress like that. I got a benefit to go to, yeah. Got a benefit to go to, and of course, Dax, it's later for you. You're kind of wrapping this up. And the interesting thing about the scallop on my dart, I actually lay the scallop on my finger when I'm throwing it. That's where that pressure point for me. So I've had a lot of people say, "Oh, it's great for your thumb." I don't use the scallop that way. So it's a difference of figuring out how a dart feels in your hands. And I've got Asian hands, like I got small hands. So but. Dax, kind of wrapping this up, what is the takeaway from this article, the understanding of, more about the grip, because there's just so much to it. Everybody has their own grip. You look at any sport, everybody does it differently. Golf, Jim Furyk, that guy had the weirdest, craziest swing ever known. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go look up Jim Furyk. You'll be like, how the hell did that guy ever hit a golf ball? It's crazy. But taking the grip into consideration in this article, what are some key points and elements you want people to really take away from this?
Sure. So Jen hit the nail on the head. When you're out and able to experiment with other people's barrels, that is priceless time to learn and really soak up what barrel style works for your grip style. So when and don't try things that are similar to what you're throwing. Try anything that's furthest from what you're throwing, because you want to be able to experiment with the different types and shapes of barrel. That's number one. And don't, we all have those times where we're feeling shy or hesitant. We don't want to ask. You know what? We've all been there, and we're all in the same gang in that regard. Just ask. 9 out of 10 people are happy to let you try their barrel. It's how we learn, and it's how we grow together as a community. Number two, we all love the game, and we approach it sometimes as a fan. But when we watch the game, I urge people to try to watch as a student. So there are players you like to watch, there are players you root for, but then there are players that you have to say, well, I grip it this way. Who else grips it like I do? And what type of barrel are they throwing? As opposed to who's the world champion? I want to buy their barrel. I know that stuff sells, but I'm sure there are more Gerwin Price darts and Peter Wright darts sitting in a drawer than getting used right now, just because they sell, of course. And then you buy them, you try them, and they sit in the box with 20 other sets. For all of us who love being able to buy barrels, depending again on
right
your
there, there's a set of Peter Wrights right there.
There you go. Depending again on your budget, if it's in your budget every year to buy one set, or if it's in your budget every year to buy 20 sets, do that experimentation as it works for your finances, and have fun with it. It is a grand experiment. I can say I've run the gamut myself from of all different barrel styles. But when I went through this experimentation myself, and obviously partnering with Jenn and A to Z and Magic and Colonial, they on the specs that I gave them based on my grip style worked with me. And literally, I said, here are my specs from nose all the way to the 2BA insert. Here's what I want in length, in dimension, and it's based on, again, my observation of players like who I saw throw like me. And this, again, this is not to say these are the guys I root for, but I have a similar grip. Rob Cross, Van Dijvenbode, and Devon Peterson. If you actually look at how they grip the darts, they all grip it fairly similarly. Van Dijvenbode and Peterson have similar barrels, despite all the nuances that make them pretty and all the different grip styles. The noses are fairly similar. If I know Rob Cross is probably watching this, Matt, and if he's not, we'll send it to him. But I would ask Rob Cross to say, look at a barrel like Peterson and Van Dijvenbode and look at the nose. I actually think he would benefit from having a tapered, grippier nose for that middle finger to rest underneath, because that's exactly what I did with this barrel. I have a small scallop. And for anyone who's ever been apprehensive about a scallop, having a scallop does not necessarily mean it's heavily front weighted or that it's going to throw. This dart is as balanced as I've ever had. And I only came across enjoying the scallop from one of the Max Hop models that I had a friend let me try out at the bar one day. So it's, all of those things, you don't know them until you try. I would have been the guy to say, no way I want a scallop. But they were in my hand and I tried them and I was like, wow, that's great.
If I may, real quick, the way that you create evenly distributed weight in Dax's barrel is you remove material from inside the front so that it balances better, by the way, guys. So what he's saying is exactly right. Don't be scared or apprehensive to try certain things if you think it's going to totally go off whack with your weight distribution. You can do anything with barrels these days, and companies are. The manufacturers are doing everything they can to create variables that work for mass amount of people. And this is truly a very subtle scallop. The one I use, for example, is extreme. It's in the very back. It's a very short and deep scallop. So it's a very clear notch. Mine is way more dramatic. And Matt's, I would need to take a better look at his too, but probably not as dramatic. Yeah, not as dramatic as mine, but kind of in between the two. The cool thing is scallops offer variants now because they're so popular, and sometimes popularity is actually, justified in darts. And then the last thing real quick, he's in 100% right. You don't just buy a dart of a pro because you think, because they're great, you think it's going to work for you. However, what I will say is when you support and you're a super fan of a certain darts player and you do want to buy their merchandise, it does affect their career though. Just putting that out there, especially if you're rooting for someone who is just on the cusp of going into the professional circuit or trying to move to England and play, and it's that person where every little thing, can have an impact on their trajectory of their success. Supporting them and buying their merchandise, whether you're going to use it or not, it will have an impact on their life. And then that's, might not be true as you peel back a little. Someone that might be a great player that has a signature barrel, they might not be getting a percentage of those sales. So, take that with a grain of salt and make sure, like, if you really want to check with that person or them personally, it might be their private business and they might not share that with you. But if you want to check, just no harm in asking. But just throwing that out there for those that might be turned off from supporting your favorite players just because it might not work for you. You could buy their darts and give it away as a gift to make a great gift, or just try out something. Just throwing that out there, just in case you guys might be discouraged from wanting to be super fans of your favorite players.
Bottom line is, go buy the Danny Baggish.
Yes,
and it'll be darts that are available by Target. And into that case, and I'll just touch base on this real quick, and then I've got a couple other things to throw out. I want to talk about the spin real quick. But in regards to player profile darts, there's again nothing. Buy them, collect them, and have fun with them and share them. And there's many sites out there to kind of throw things back around and try stuff out, because you have the Simon Whitlock. It looks like a freaking javelin versus the Rob Cross barrel. And then, let's not talk about probably the best darts player ever, 16 world championships and all that other stuff, and what does he throw? It's like a ball that's got a point on it. So it's fine and I've collected and bought and traded and sold and everything. That's the beauty of our sport. It's kind of like trading cards. You get to buy them and trade them and have fun with them. And I highly recommend it. You do it. And you should buy the B52s before they're gone, because they're limited. No. One thing I want to talk a little bit about the spin, and then I've got a couple questions because I see some differences in your barrels, which may affect grip. But in regards to that, the spin, everybody asks, should you spin the dart? Should you spin it in your hand? How does that affect gripping the barrel? Or should you just pick it up and do it? Or should you spin it? What's the thought behind that? I'm gonna throw that at you, Dax.
It's a great overall question. I'm not going to say you should or shouldn't. What I will say as kind of a general catch-all, both in relation specifically to anyone's individual grip, or in relation to the coil, like how you bring the dart back, and does it rotate or spin in your hand, and do you spin it out? Just remember this: the more moving pieces, the more fingers, the more involved, the more variables. And the more variables, the more potential for greater variance. So if you want to start it's always great to use Phil Taylor as a bar for everything, because he's the pinnacle of the sport for all time. I always started with, well, what does he do? And it's not to say you need to mimic everything perfectly, but a guy like Taylor, I think if we all could and felt so steady coming set and holding the dart the way he did, I think we would all try to do that if we could. I don't know that I've ever been able to hold a dart that steady the way he does. I have a little more rhythm to my throw, at least when I'm getting going and I'm in my spot. And I will say, just by accident, I have maybe a slight coil to my dart, but I'd prefer, as Jen said, that first dart in your hand, you want it the way you want to hold the dart by the time you bring it up to the set position. You don't want to have too many machinations in your hand from the draw, from your offhand all the way up to the set position, because by the time you do, the dart has moved, your fingers have moved. You'd ideally like them not to. That being said, if you do you just want to be able to make sure that, one, it's minimized to only the absolute motion you need necessary to do what you do. And the dart needs to have really come to a full stop in that split second that you're set. Because if it's moving, that's where you're going to have your spray variance on the board.
So I just want to thank both of you guys for coming on. And there's so much more we could talk about grip. But I wanted to thank you guys immensely. It means a lot to myself and to the darts community when you guys come on and share, because you have a great deal of knowledge in the sport, from being a player within the sport, being a coach within the sport, being working with manufacturers directly within the sport. So thank you guys both for coming on. I do have kind of one more thing here. I just want to share this, and this is kind of a question that leads into maybe another conversation. But when you look at your dart here, it's different, because this is the steel tip, but here's the soft tip, and we're seeing, wouldn't that essentially potentially affect your grip by that little bit of girth within the barrel? But then again, wouldn't the point, should I have a longer point? Should I have grip in my point? Should I have a shorter point? What does the point do? And then the shaft thing, what does this stupid thing do? And how long should it be? And what material should it be? And then these flights, how does that work? And all this other stuff. Could you guys answer all those questions, please? Maybe in a next interview, because I need to let you guys go. But those are all the crazy things that come into the whole concept of grip, and what do you do, and how does this work, and how does this feel? And like for me, I talk about the scallop. When I hold my dart, I literally lay it this way. I'm using the scallop. I'm not using my thumb in the scallop. I'm using it to hold my finger, because I was spinning the dart so much and it was going so far right that was a way that I corrected it, was having that. So in any case, thank you guys for being here. And again, there's so many aspects of the dart that we could talk about. I do want to talk about points at some point because there's so many variations of the point. So to get to my point, maybe we'll talk about points later. But thank you guys for being on. I'm going to let you guys go. And I do want to thank again our sponsors, of course, Magicwear. Jenn is involved with them and these incredibly great. This jersey is phenomenal, by the way. The colorations are super good. And Shot Darts, who seems to love everybody in the darts community. Their barrels are phenomenal. They're, again, pieces of art that we get to throw. And Condor Flights and Shafts. I happen to like the axe. I know there's plenty of options out there. Grab one that you like and play it. Guys, thanks for being on. Any last minute words of wisdom?
Well, I guess I could say we can answer all those questions that you threw out there last minute sometime, but there is priority in darts. There is priority in form and mechanics, and we can maybe spend some time to think about giving someone a plan. You know, if you're a brand new player, we want to get them young. I really believe that to my core, that you want to start thinking about these things and figuring it out before you've developed your mechanics and your habits. And that's the only way you can really answer the question exactly what kind of setup is right for you. But yeah, it's a pleasure. By far, this article that Dax just came out with is going to easily be the most important piece of content that he has provided us, and it will influence more people than I think anything else that we've covered thus far. It's a very, very important thing. Grip, barrel choice, biggest impact on your performance. I truly believe that. So I hope you guys take the time to read it, and hopefully you get some insight out of it, regardless of your skill level, because it absolutely appeals to everyone in darts.
And thank you for modeling. Jenn.
Oh, my lifelong dream to be a hand model also was satisfied. So it's just a win-win all around.
Totally awesome. Totally awesome. And Dax, any last words of wisdom in the grip?
Yeah, a big thank you to Jenn for really tying together the article with her technological savvy and craftsmanship in the pictures, because honestly, the pictures are what we look for when we search these things. It really tied the content together. And I am equally as passionate about talking about all this stuff as Jenn is. We both really enjoy helping the community. Feel free to reach out to me on Facebook or reach me through A to Z Darts if you have more questions.
Well, thank you both for being here. And I just want to tell everybody, look for the book barrel bundle coming to A to Z Darts later this year. That'll be exciting. It'll be blue. I'll tell you that much. Well, thanks everybody for watching. If you guys would just, the usual hang on, we'll hang out in the green room a little bit, but thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next Tuesday. And next Tuesday, we're going to be talking darts, and I got something cool in the mail that I haven't opened yet. And we're going to open this up next Tuesday because I'm pretty sure I know what it is, but we'll be taking a look at that. So make sure next Tuesday morning, 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, catch Coffee and Darts episode 91. Thanks, guys, for being on.
Take care.
Thank you.